How to beat the witches in Witch Watch. If you were cursed to be protected by a witch for the rest of your life and had to deal with magical chaos destroying everything around you every single day, what would you do? You've got supernatural disasters following you everywhere, a crazy witch girlfriend who's obsessed with keeping you safe, and the only way to survive will be to master magic, avoid death flags, and somehow not get killed by the very person trying to protect you. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the magical mayhem in Witch Watch. This guy will be forced to navigate witch politics and supernatural disasters within the next few weeks. Morihito here has been cursed with a protection spell that's supposed to keep him safe, but instead it's turning his entire life into a magical nightmare. Finally done hiding from the chaos, he decides to embrace his weird new reality and maybe, just maybe, not die in the process. He's stuck with his childhood friend, Nico, who happens to be an incredibly powerful witch, and she's absolutely obsessed with keeping him alive. But here's the problem. Her magic is so chaotic and destructive that she's basically a walking disaster zone. Every time she tries to help him, something explodes, catches fire, or gets turned into a frog. Getting thrown into the world of witches and magic, Morihito quickly realizes that Nico has the magical power of a nuclear bomb, but the emotional control of a 5-year-old having a tantrum. She casually destroys half the school, trying to make him lunch, and he realizes that this protection spell might actually be more dangerous than whatever it's supposed to be protecting him from. Sweating bullets, he tries to live a normal high school life, but Nico tells him that she knows he's in constant danger, and they should go hunt some magical creatures instead of studying. Wanting to forget his old peaceful life, he says absolutely not, but she threatens to turn his entire class into newts if he doesn't listen to her. Unable to refuse because, let's be honest, she's terrifying when she's angry, Morihito gets dragged into his first magical adventure. They head to investigate some weird supernatural occurrence at the local shrine. Nico gives him the rundown of what they're dealing with. Apparently there's some evil spirit that's been possessing people and making them do dangerous things. Since someone posted about it online, Nico realizes she needs to take action before more people get hurt. However, she doesn't sense any immediate magical threat, but suddenly, Morihito gets massive chills. The problem is he has no idea why this is happening to him. Nico switches to plan B and decides they need to confront whatever's causing the disturbance directly. That's when they notice Morihito's cursed protection starts reacting, and his face turns into this weird smile when they get closer to the danger. But he doesn't even realize it's happening. Approaching the shrine, they hear something inside asking for help. A ghostly figure appears and forces the shrine doors to open. Nico instantly uses this moment to cast a binding spell, and that's when the real chaos begins. Everyone watches as her magic completely goes haywire, creating explosions of light and energy that paint the entire area in magical chaos. Having seen enough supernatural destruction for one day, the group heads back home. Back to normal life, Morihito gets back to trying to study while Nico tutors him in basic magic theory. He notices that she's extremely intelligent, which means she probably isn't just randomly destructive with her magic. There's actually method to her madness. She tells him that the spirit they encountered didn't react until he got close, and she wants to know why. He explains about his protection curse, that anywhere dangerous he goes, supernatural things tend to show up and target him specifically. Excited at the possibilities, she begs him to let her take him on more magical adventures. Hell no, because he wants to live a normal life without everything around him exploding. But then other witches overhear this conversation and tell him privately that Nico recently lost her familiar in a magical accident. And this is why she's so obsessed with protecting him. She's terrified of losing someone else she cares about. Her magical powers went completely out of control after the trauma, which caused her to see threats everywhere. It wasn't until the accident that she realized her protection magic was so strong, it could actually be more dangerous than the things she's trying to protect people from. Feeling guilty, Morihito agrees to help her get better control of her magic. They agree to go back out for one more magical adventure, with him promising to help her practice restraint. Heading back out the next day, Nico hands him a magical charm and says this will help regulate her power when she's around him. But instead of going somewhere new, she drags him back to the same shrine with a completely different plan this time. Reaching the shrine again, the spirit appears and gives off this horrifying magical aura that makes Morihito's protection curse go absolutely berserk. The curse suddenly starts pulling him toward the danger instead of away from it. Okay, well, Morihito might seem really unlucky, but he's actually being incredibly stupid here. I would have dealt with this magical chaos way more effectively by using some basic common sense and maybe a fire extinguisher. Let me explain. Morihito here can basically sense supernatural danger, which, if we think about it, is actually an incredibly useful ability. When your body starts reacting to magical threats, that's your early warning system telling you to get the hell out of there. This happens because some people are naturally sensitive to magical energy fields, kind of like how some people can sense when a storm is coming. Plus, if we consider that witches like Nico have access to incredibly powerful magic that can literally reshape reality, it means that Morihito here might actually be the key to helping her control her abilities. However, despite having access to some really useful supernatural senses, what these guys just did was incredibly reckless. If I was him, I would have focused on understanding Nico's emotional triggers first, before agreeing to any magical adventures. I would have researched her magical abilities, figured out what sets off her chaotic episodes, and established some ground rules for magical practice sessions. It's noted that she's doing all this dangerous magic because she's terrified of losing him, which, while touching, means she's operating from a place of fear and panic rather than rational thinking. Since she's got enough magical power to level a city block, we have no way of knowing how much collateral damage she's willing to cause to keep him safe. This means partnering with this magical disaster waiting to happen is incredibly risky. The fact that we survived the first encounter and lived to tell about it means we should probably establish some safety protocols before continuing. Even if Nico is leading these magical investigations, despite being a teenager with emotional control issues, it's better to have clear communication and safety measures in place. Being Morihito means I would have taken better precautions, maybe brought some magical suppressant items, established safe words for when her magic starts going out of control, and definitely would have researched what we were dealing with before walking into it blind. We know that his protection curse attracts supernatural threats to him, and Nico's magic tends to explode when she gets emotional. Therefore, it's pretty obvious that combining these two factors is going to create some serious magical disasters. At the end of the day, there's nothing to gain from these random magical adventures if we had just focused on helping Nico get therapy for her trauma and magical control training instead of encouraging her chaotic behavior. Trapped by his own protection curse, Morihito starts panicking as he gets pulled toward the dangerous spirit. He sees the ghostly figure approaching him, and just as he's about to get possessed, Nico notices that the spirit is somehow overriding the protection magic she gave him. This makes her realize just how desperately supernatural entities want to get their hands on him. Having seen enough, she takes out her magical focus and charges in with way too much magical power. She forces the shrine doors open with explosive magic and grabs Morihito's protective charm, then slams it directly at the spirit. This creates a massive magical explosion that completely destroys the shrine's barriers and banishes the spirit. She assures Morihito that no matter what happens, she'll always protect him, even if it means burning down half the town in the process. This causes Morihito to completely freak out and wonder what kind of magical psychopath Nico really is. Later, he gets frustrated with both her and the other witches about all the magical chaos following them around. But the other witches point out that when he was near the shrine yesterday, he didn't realize that he was actually smiling when the danger appeared. They suggest that deep down, he actually enjoys the excitement of dealing with supernatural threats, even though he won't admit it. Morihito doesn't believe them and suspects that while Nico is incredibly powerful at magic, she has trouble finding supernatural threats on her own. This probably means that dangerous spirits are actually avoiding her because her magical aura is so intense that it scares them away. The next day, Morihito heads back to magic practice thinking today will be a normal training session. Oh, that's hilarious. Wouldn't you know it? Nico blackmails him again into going on another terrifying magical adventure. Is this guy a masochist or what? Anyway, the other witches reveal that they're going to visit Nico's mentor today, an ancient witch who's been training magic users for centuries. They tell Morihito that since he got cursed, he should regularly get magical cleansing done to keep his protection curse from attracting too much supernatural attention. Morihito gets surprised and says he wasn't scheduled for a cleansing session for another few weeks, but the witches don't care. Reaching the mentor's magical workshop, the old witch greets her students but immediately senses that Morihito can detect supernatural threats and keeps a watchful eye on him while Nico goes in for advanced magical training. Waiting outside, Nico gets restless, so the other witches show Morihito what his cursed hand looks like under the magical glove he always wears. Seeing all these glowing magical marks, they tell him that these symbols are a result of his protection curse, and they're getting stronger over time. During the magical cleansing session, Morihito gets interrupted when they encounter another low-level supernatural threat. Nico saves him as usual, but she's clearly getting more unstable with her magic use. Having enough magical chaos for one day, the mentor witch ends up being impressed with Nico's raw power, but concerned about her emotional control. She gives Morihito a special magical item to help regulate Nico's abilities. Heading back home, Nico tells Morihito she wants to show him something important in her room. Going upstairs, he finds hundreds of magical artifacts and spell components scattered everywhere, including trapped spirits from their previous adventures. This makes him realize why he always felt such intense magical energy in this house. There are literally dozens of supernatural entities contained in various magical items throughout her room. Nico reveals that she keeps the most dangerous supernatural threats trapped in magical containers because she's planning something big. In order to find a way to break his protection curse permanently, she's been collecting powerful magical entities to use in a major spell ritual. She goes into detail about how supernatural binding actually works. When spirits get trapped in magical items, they become connected to the physical object, and that's how she controls them. Morihito gets freaked out, but the other witches tell him they're just magical tools and he should relax. This makes him realize that the other witches can't sense how much dangerous magical energy is actually stored here. Nico reassures him that no matter what happens, she'll keep him safe, and then asks for some of his hair for the ritual, like a complete creep. The next day, Morihito struggles with whether to go back to magical training. He just wants a normal life, but he feels like he owes the witches something for trying to help him break his curse. Entering the house, he prepares for another training session, but Nico comes at him saying she desperately needs his hair for a magical ritual. He gets completely freaked out and tries to leave, but the other witches try to lighten the mood by suggesting they go to another supernatural hotspot. What is wrong with these magical disaster magnets? However, this time Morihito stands his ground and refuses, leaving the house. Confused, Nico tells the others they'll investigate supernatural threats without him. She mentions to the other witches that she thought Morihito actually enjoyed dealing with magical chaos since he could easily get his protection curse removed by a professional if he really wanted to. Hearing this, one of the witches turns her attention to Nico, asking what she means. This makes Nico realize that none of them actually knew about the curse removal option, and she has a sudden realization. She changes their plans and says she knows a place they can go to help Morihito since he's become important to her as well. She directs the other witch on where to go to deal with Morihito's curse. They drive to this abandoned magical research facility to locate a powerful supernatural entity. Nico mentions that this place is where magical experiments went wrong and dozens of failed spells created dangerous spiritual residue. She gives the other witch a rundown of what horrors to expect. They're up against the accumulated negative energy of years of magical failures, and it's all overseen by the ghost of the head researcher who died in a magical accident. However, Nico says something insane and tells the other witch that she needs to handle this alone, and if she doesn't come back within an hour, the witch should go get help. Somehow, she agrees to Nico's crazy plan and leaves this emotionally unstable magical powerhouse alone at this dangerous supernatural site. She's so incredibly stupid. Nico heads in and immediately senses that there's way more dangerous magical energy here than she expected. She gets surrounded by hostile magical entities and the ghost of the researcher himself. Trying to banish this spirit, she unleashes too much magical power, causing a massive explosion that nearly brings down the entire building. Getting seriously injured by the magical backlash, she runs deeper into the facility to hide. She takes out some emergency magical supplies, paper talismans that she can infuse with her own magical energy to create decoys of herself. Fun fact, this also grants her extra chances to survive magical attacks. How convenient. And that's when this evil magical researcher shows up. Meanwhile, the other witch waits outside but realizes it's been over an hour and rushes off to find Morihito for help. Finding him in like 5 seconds at the local library, she tells him Nico is in serious magical trouble. He wonders how she found him so easily because it's suspicious, but she says it's not important and explains that Nico was trying to break his curse because she could tell it was bothering him. Feeling guilty about abandoning her, he agrees to help rescue Nico. Back to our magical disaster girl, she just finishes trapping a hostile spirit in one of her magical containers and threatens the others that if they attack her, she'll destroy their bound companion. This gives her a moment to escape, and she places more magical decoys behind her to slow down her pursuers. She gains some distance and hides in the facility's main magical laboratory. Getting slowly surrounded, she sees the hostile magical entities suddenly rush off in the opposite direction. Nearby, Morihito finally arrives and immediately runs into the dangerous magical army. He flees for his life while trying to reach the main facility. Reaching the laboratory, he hears Nico calling out and quickly tries to lead the hostile spirits away while he comes up with a really half-baked plan. I would have dealt with these magical threats way better than Morihito by using basic magical theory and some common sense. Let me explain. At this point, we know the dangers of dealing with uncontrolled magical energy, and Nico especially has done this kind of thing multiple times. This is why it makes no sense that she didn't leave detailed information about the magical entities they were dealing with before going in alone. For a teenage witch who's obsessed with magical combat, she's really not that strategic about it. One of the main rules of dealing with supernatural threats is understanding what you're up against, because magical entities can have completely different weaknesses and strengths. This applies to general magical combat as well. Respecting your magical opponents means taking more precautions and planning more carefully. You should expect magical entities to be at least as dangerous as you are, if not more so. Clearly, Nico wasn't doing this because she's been acting exactly like an impulsive teenager, running into dangerous magical situations without proper preparation and not bringing adequate magical protection items. The spirit here is known as a magical researcher who died in an experiment gone wrong. While Nico might not have known that this good scientist turned into an evil magical entity, it's reasonable to assume that if we had researched the facility beforehand, we could have brought specific magical tools designed to counter laboratory-created supernatural threats. Just saying, a little homework could have saved everyone a lot of trouble. Running through the facility, Morihito circles back, and Nico uses her remaining magical energy to collapse part of the building, trapping some of the hostile spirits. She grabs a piece of the main supernatural entity and quickly meets up with Morihito. They escape to the other witch's car and somehow manage to get away from the magical disaster zone. Later, Morihito tells Nico he knows she risked her life for him and thanks her. She tells him that he's become her most important person, and unlike her family, she's now powerful enough to protect everyone she cares about. She takes him back to her room and reveals why she needed his hair. She needed it to make magical protection items work properly, and she's incorporated a piece of her own magical energy into each protective charm. By doing this, any magical attack aimed at him gets redirected to her magical items instead, including attacks from any supernatural entity she's captured. This makes her safe from retaliation and turns all her bound spirits into servants who have to protect him as well. This keeps both of them safe 24/7, and she wanted to create the same protection for Morihito. She throws the piece of the researcher's spirit she collected into her magical collection and tells her bound spirits that this entity tried to hurt someone under her protection. As a result, the spirits in her collection get angry at this newcomer and want to destroy it. Nico then tells them that since this new spirit doesn't have her magical protection, they can take revenge without getting hurt themselves. Morihito watches in horror as the supernatural entities tear apart the researcher spirit. Even at a fraction of its strength, the researcher realizes it's completely screwed. Nico then forces this spirit to beg her to become her servant in order to be protected from the other angry supernatural entities. But Morihito interrupts and asks the big question: why is she keeping so many dangerous magical entities trapped like this? She reveals her master plan. Oh, great! She's building an army of supernatural servants that will help her become the most powerful witch in history so she can protect everyone she cares about forever. Oh, that's definitely going to end well. She says she wasn't able to capture the entire magical research facility today, only a small piece. But she promises Morihito that when she recovers, she'll go back and claim the whole thing. Then they can use its power to permanently break his curse, and he thanks her. To return the favor, he offers to help her dive deeper into magical adventures while he continues trying to live a normal life. Wow, that's definitely going to work out perfectly. A few days later, Morihito starts his first day at a new school with two important goals: learn to control his supernatural sensitivity better, and finally make some normal friends who don't explode things with magic. He heads to his first school festival, wearing clothes the other witches picked out for him, including special glasses that secretly monitor his magical exposure levels. He immediately sucks at making friends, but he meets this nice guy who says his name is Miyoshi, president of the Occult Research Club. Miyoshi asks Morihito to join them for some club activities back at their meeting room. Watching through her scrying spell, Nico hears something suspicious in the audio. Magical energy that sounds like a binding curse, and thinks something supernatural is targeting him at this school event. After the festival, Morihito meets up with Miyoshi and gets in his car with other students from the occult club. They give him some tea to help him relax and tell him their club room is in an off-campus building. But suddenly, Morihito feels that familiar supernatural chill. He mentions it to the other students, thinking he's just being paranoid. But Miyoshi tells him he's into supernatural stuff too, and shares a creepy story about their school. There's this secret student organization that pretends to be a normal club, but actually recruits members during school events to join them in dangerous magical rituals. Each year, the club changes its name because all the previous members end up getting seriously hurt or disappearing entirely. The police never figure out who the new leader is because they use different identities each time. But there's always one name that appears on the club registration forms year after year, continuing the organization's dark legacy, and that name is Miyoshi. Morihito finally sees the evil magical aura surrounding him and realizes that Miyoshi is the cult leader. That's when he gets extremely drowsy because the tea was drugged and passes out. Meanwhile, the witches watch him through their magical surveillance. How helpful of them to just watch instead of actually helping. They quickly stop scrying to go rescue him. Heading to the location, Nico researches the building Morihito was taken to and discovers that over 200 students have gone missing there over the last few years. She suspects that a magical ritual site connected to the school is how supernatural entities possess students before corrupting them to join the cult. Nico wonders what this magical entity gains by leading students to their doom and thinks there's something bigger going on. Just as they reach the building, okay, Morihito is completely screwed, but I would have handled this way better by not focusing on rescuing him and instead relying on this building's already known reputation. This situation is actually based on real-life cult recruitment tactics that happen at schools and universities. These organizations specifically target lonely or isolated students who are looking for belonging and acceptance. The crazy part about these situations is that they often operate in plain sight, with official club status and everything. Most educational institutions have policies against this kind of thing, but enforcement can be difficult when the organizations keep changing their names and leadership. In this case, if there have been 200 disappearances connected to this building over several years, it means this should definitely be on the police and school administration's radar. The building would have been investigated, and there would be safety protocols in place. At this point, these disappearances would be classified as a serious public safety issue, which means law enforcement and school security should have been monitoring this location. The school would have wanted to prevent another disaster from ruining their reputation. Educational institutions take student safety very seriously due to liability concerns, which is why campus security systems and emergency response protocols exist. By calling the authorities for help, emergency responders would have arrived first and could have handled the dangerous cult members while the witches focused on dealing with the supernatural aspects. Instead of rushing in alone, coordinating with official authorities would have been much more effective. Nico climbs up the building walls and bursts in just in time to save Morihito. She uses a powerful binding spell on Miyoshi, forcing him to release the supernatural entity possessing him. But something's wrong. Even after the spirit is expelled, he's still trying to hurt the other students. Nico realizes that this man was already evil before the supernatural possession, and she quickly restrains the cult leader while freeing the other students before they can be harmed. They manage to escape before the authorities arrive, and Nico captures another powerful supernatural entity for her growing magical army. On the way back, Morihito gets depressed about how he failed to make normal friends again and will never be able to live a regular life. Nico tells him he's better off learning how to deal with supernatural situations since he'll always encounter them due to his curse. She says he needs to learn how to protect the people he cares about instead of running away from his supernatural nature. Ooh, shots fired. She offers to train him properly in magical combat, and he has a realization. He asks them how they knew where to find him, but fortunately Nico covers for the other witches' stalking behavior by claiming they used magical divination to locate him. A few days later, they go on a camping trip to take a break from all the supernatural chaos. Nico asks Morihito if he's decided about joining her official magical investigation team, but he's still unsure about embracing a life of constant supernatural danger. But the other witch later convinces him to join as their researcher and strategist. She reveals that she's been documenting everything that's happened to them so far, and she believes there's a pattern to these supernatural encounters. She suggests they should work together as a team from now on, instead of handling things separately. Just then, they hear someone scream in the distance, but Morihito doesn't sense any supernatural presence and thinks the person is probably just startled by something normal. They head to bed, but later Morihito wakes up to find one of the witches sleepwalking toward a dangerous cliff where they heard the scream earlier. Hearing a supernatural voice calling to her, Nico realizes this is a special type of entity that uses mind control to make people jump from high places. Since it's not directly possessing the witch, they can't break the spell until they find the entity's actual location. Having a risky plan, Nico says they need to follow the possessed witch to the cliff so they can locate and destroy the controlling spirit, otherwise she'll never be free from its influence. So they prepare accordingly. Okay, we're in a situation where this group of supposedly experienced magical practitioners are acting like complete amateurs again. Even if they wanted a break from supernatural investigation, it's crazy that they didn't prepare for magical threats during their camping trip. Since at least 2 of the 3 people here attract supernatural entities on a daily basis, and Japan's wilderness areas are known for having spiritual significance, this means they should have brought magical detection equipment like scrying mirrors or protective wardstones. That would have been a much better way to avoid being at a disadvantage in an area without backup or magical infrastructure. It's like going camping in an area known for having bears. Any sane person would bring bear spray and proper food storage. Also, Nico knew exactly what was wrong with the possessed witch and revealed that supernatural entities can control victims from a distance, making them much more dangerous than simple possession. She could have prepared countermeasures for this in advance. At this point, they should have been equipped with magical recording devices so they could document each supernatural encounter. This way, the footage could be reviewed after each investigation to figure out what went wrong, what worked, and how to improve their tactics. This would have been hugely beneficial to their team and made them much more effective magical investigators. But apparently, I'm the only one thinking strategically here. Heading to the cliff, Nico hides while Morihito guides the possessed witch across it, acting as bait. When he senses the location of the controlling spirit, he signals Nico using one of her magical communication devices. She attacks the entity, forcing it to make a desperate move by trying to possess Morihito directly. This allows them to trap it with a specially prepared magical container, and they seal it in a spirit-proof bag full of purified salt. But that's when the witch heads straight for the cliff edge to jump. Just as one of Nico's protective charms gets destroyed by other hidden supernatural entities, letting them know exactly how many spirits are in the area. Meanwhile, Morihito reaches for the possessed witch and falls off the cliff with her, but they both get saved by their safety rope harness since they had planned for this possibility. They continue running while Nico on the cliff uses purified salt to trap two more spirits that were hiding nearby. Down below, Morihito rushes away with the witch, but encounters more supernatural entities in the distance. He realizes they're being hunted, and that's when the witch starts panicking as Morihito trips and falls into the nearby stream. Spirits hiding in the water appear and try to drag him under while the possessed witch attempts to pour another supernatural entity directly into his mouth. About to be possessed himself, Morihito thinks fast and drinks some blessed water he brought, forcing the invading spirit to leave his body. He quickly captures it in another magical container and seals it in his bag of purified salt. Finally arriving at the scene, Nico comes in and saves the day by trapping the remaining hostile spirits with some incredible magical techniques. She gets them to reveal which one was controlling the witch, captures that specific entity, and finally frees her from possession. The next morning, the witch wakes up with no memory of what happened and thanks Morihito for protecting her. They both realize they care deeply about each other, and he promises he'll always keep her safe. He vows to break his curse and help them all start fresh lives together. Little does he know that the witch's secret plan of using his curse to bring them all closer together is actually working perfectly. Yeah, she's actually a high-key manipulative mastermind. Great later, Nico informs Morihito that seeing groups of supernatural entities working together almost never happens in nature. Spirits usually consume each other to gain more power and maintain their presence in the physical world. They only cooperate occasionally if they don't realize that they're dead, are bound to a specific location, or are uniting against a bigger threat in the area. Nico wants Morihito to understand that it's possible the powerful supernatural entity they're ultimately looking for is closer than they think. Known as the Master of Curses, this entity has incredible magical abilities that they need to prepare for. She thanks him for helping her encounter more supernatural threats in 1 week than she had found in months of searching alone. This has allowed her to build her supernatural army much faster than she thought possible. She then creates a magical focus item for him, basically an enchanted pendant that will use his curse to help guide them to more supernatural entities, allowing them to expand their collection even more rapidly. Finishing their conversation, he heads back to his normal life, but gets a call from his school saying they have a new student he needs to help tutor, one that will change everything. The next day, he meets this new person and immediately notices her strange eyes. He thinks they might be colored contacts and sees this seemingly clumsy girl who has terrible luck. A server accidentally spills a drink on her, but Morihito notices supernatural footprints on the floor around her. The girl realizes that he can see supernatural things too and begs him to help her. She says she's never been directly possessed, but supernatural entities have surrounded her for years, and bad things happen to people near her as a result. This included the recent death of her older brother. She thinks his spirit is the one protecting her from other supernatural threats 24/7, but because of this, he can't move on to the afterlife. She asked Morihito to help her resolve this situation so her brother can finally rest in peace. He decides to bring her to meet Nico. The new girl thinks Nico is just a child, but Nico can immediately sense that this girl is being followed by two different supernatural entities, one more powerful and malevolent than anything she's encountered before. She quickly sets up an improvised magical ritual and manages to trap the evil spirit that's been following the girl, apparently solving her problem. She takes a strand of hair from her to create a protective charm, but notices that the girl's eyes have changed color. That night, Morihito has a prophetic dream where a spirit warns him that the girl's brother is actually the real threat, and he needs to save her immediately. Suddenly, he gets woken up by Nico calling him on the phone. She warns him that the protective charm she made for the girl is currently taking magical damage, meaning someone is trying to harm her right now. They both rush over to her apartment. Nico finds the building and climbs up to break in through the window. She sees the girl's terrifying brother choking her, but for some reason, he's forced to stop as the clock strikes midnight. He's now unable to harm her and tells them that he was trying to save her from a fate worse than death. After saying this, he finally ascends to the afterlife. A little later, the girl cries about losing her brother and wonders why he tried to kill her. But Morihito notices that he didn't sense anything evil about her brother's spirit, which means he must have had a good reason for his actions. She tells them it doesn't make sense since she only has 4 years left to live anyway. Nico and Morihito stare at her in shock, and that's when she reveals her horrifying fate. A few years ago, a powerful supernatural entity fell in love with her and decided to claim her as his bride when she turns 20. Morihito recognizes the same spirit he saw in his prophetic dream in a family photo of the girl and her brother. He tells Nico, who initially doesn't see it, but when she focuses her magical sight, she can see the supernatural entity in the photograph too. She thinks Morihito saw it first because of his connection to shrine magic and supernatural sensitivity. Just then, she notices the girl's pupils have turned into star shapes and suspects that the spirit they captured earlier has just escaped from her magical collection. Morihito mentions he thought her eyes were just colored contacts, but Nico finally realizes they're actually a supernatural brand. This girl has been marked for sacrifice by something with the power of a god.